Guys, we're back in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm Matt Ross Bang. I can't wait to show you this place. We've been here before. If you've seen the Puremix start to finish, I basically grew up here. This is Sam Phillips Recording Service. I spent so many years here as the engineer. I rented the B room, made tons of records in the back. We're practically family. It's still owned by the Phillips family. So many amazing records here. I can't tell you. I mean, I basically lived here, basically family with these people. We are just so close. I have moved on to another studio, but I consider this place my home away from home, so I'm so excited to show you inside. Let's go on in and see what's going on today. I mean, I promise we'll get to see it. I've been here so long. These guys are family, family. Scott, it's me, Matt.
Matt, now how many times are we gonna have to tell you, man?
Scott,
you can't keep coming by here like this.
But I got Puremix with me. Well, Puremix.
They're welcome to come in, but I'm sorry, you cannot come here anymore. I'm sorry.
You guys have fun.
Come on in. You guys are welcome. Not this guy though.
Scott, we're neighbors.
Sorry, man.
Puremix, Mark.
Can't do it, Matt. Sorry, buddy. Man.
Who was that, Scott?
It was Matt Rossbang, man. I told him that he wasn't welcome to come here anymore, but we've got the guys from Puremix here today. We're going to give them a tour of Sam Phillips Recording.
Well, great. Well, welcome here, guys.
This is Jerry Phillips,
yeah,
the one, the only.
We're in the Sam Phillips Recording Studio, of course, was built in 1960. It was the sister studio to Sun Studio over there, which was never called Sun. At that time, it was called Memphis Recording Service, and my dad never owned that building. He always rented it. And so when he got some money off of Elvis and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash and Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King and all those guys, he built this place, and he called it the Little Cape Canaveral of recording studios. And so we're in the lobby now, and Scott Bomar here, chief engineer and chief everything around here.
Man. You know? The first time I came here and recorded, I was 18 or 19 years old, and I came here to work with Roland James, who worked with Jerry's dad, Sam Phillips, over at Sun. And Roland was a real mentor to me, and I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to make a lot a lot of records with Roland.
Roland played all the guitar breaks on the Jerry Lee Lewis stuff, you know, the whole lot of shaking and Great Balls of Fire and all this stuff. He was a great guy.
This is an amazing studio. It opened in 1960, and it's been open ever since 1960. It's never closed. The Phillips family never got rid of anything, never sold anything. So all the Neumann mics, all the Universal Audio mic pre's, EMT plates, all the amazing equipment that you guys bought in 1960 when you opened, it's all still here at the studio.
Started building on it in 1958. Actually, the downstairs part of it was a Midas muffler shop where you could drive in. When you drove into the parking lot out there, you could drive on into the building. And then converted it to a recording studio and added the top and all that to it. But you guys want to see the studio portion of this place, or?
Let's do it. Okay. Come on.
All right. Well, this is our Studio A. Originally, when the building was built, there was no carpet on the floor. There was no ISO booths or anything like that. It was all live floor, live wall. This thing's here. If you can imagine this, the top part of this being gone, that was a string and horn stand where you could put your string players and horn players up there and mic them above. It was a very effective little thing. If you've been to the Sun Studio and looked at the ceiling over there, it's got an undulating ceiling over there that my dad built with his hands. And then when he got this place, he put a more state-of-the-art, same design in this building for acoustic treatments. When there was no carpet on the floor and no isolation booth, these doors on the wall, you can open it. You see there's fiberglass and stuff in there that deadens the sound. And you can open the doors and deaden the sound of the room, or close the doors to liven the sound of the room. And it was really, really effective when there was hard surface everywhere. But you could really deaden it or liven it up as much as you really wanted to. And then, you know, when multi-track recording came in, basically, everything had to be separated. Then the vocal had to be in a booth, and the drums had to be in a booth, and everything had to be kind of separated. That's the vocal booth there. That's the drum booth there, which Scott uses a lot for guitar amps too, and depending on what the situation is. Either one of the booths can be used for other things, but they're basically designed as a drum booth and a, you know, you don't want the drums feeding into the piano when you're mixing down unless that's what you're going for is the live room sound, you know. This was done in the 70s, the early 70s, these booths. They've been here, you know, since then. Those are like guitar booths for guitar amps. They really work really good isolation, and it's a cool studio, man. It really was. I've always say when you're in here, if a studio likes you, likes your music, it'll help you. And I really do believe that, you know. Scott, you got something you want to add to this?
It's an amazing room to work in. You know, you walk in and you instantly feel comfortable. You instantly feel the energy of all the people who've been here in the past and recorded. Originally, it was a 3-track studio, so that's why there's 3 monitors here.
I learned on a 3-track machine. That tells you how old I am. But that was the state of the art, you know. And then when 8-track came in, we go, wow, we got 8 tracks. What are we going to do with all that? And then 16, and then 24, you know, then it just kept going and going and going. But I think it was good to learn the basics because my dad did, his stuff was all mono over there, you know. And 3-track was a real big step up at the time. But we were at a party one night. It was a big, I think it was an English band. I'm not going to say the name of them because I could be wrong, but their manager came up, my dad, and said, Mr. Phillips, he said, what's the secret of rock and roll? And he looked at him and said, well, son, you got to reach way down deep inside yourself and pull it out of your asshole, which I thought was a great definition of what you need to do when you go into the studio. You're not in the studio all the time. And when you get a chance to go into a studio, what he was saying is don't leave anything down inside yourself, you know, pull it all out right then and there. And he always said, don't call any attention to the microphones, makes people nervous, you know. And so that was kind of his philosophy. And he had a lot of psychology. He talked about psychology in recording too. There's a lot of psychology. Not paying attention to the microphone is one of those psychological tips that he used. And I've got a saying that I say that helps people a lot is that when you're in the studio, you're not playing for the tape machine, you're playing for the universe. The tape machine just remembers it for you. That way, you know, you can make mistakes or whatever you want to do, and it'll still be there. And so that, to me, that frees me up when I'm in the studio, and it has freed some other people I've worked with up in the studio. When my dad decided that he wanted to get out of the independent record business because of all the corporate ownership of everything, he wanted to build a studio where anybody, anywhere could come in and get the finest product ever that you could get anywhere in the studio. We've got 3 analog echo chambers here. His focus changed from being an independent label owner to a publisher and a recording person, you know what I mean? He didn't do a lot of engineering himself when he got over here. My brother and I did most of it in the early days. Well, Scotty Moore did a lot of it in the early days. Then Knox and I picked up, my brother Knox Phillips. He died a couple of years ago, but we've kept 64 years this year. We've been in business, and you know we pretty much interested. My daughter Hallie is also involved in the business, so we've kind of kept it a family affair, and we're real proud of our heritage. I guess that's what I could say, you know.
This room, what's really great about working in this room is that you can make it as live or as dead as you want to. Like, you don't have to use the booths. You could put everything out here on the floor and not separate anything and make it as live as you want. Or if you want a lot of separation with the 2 booths and then the cabinet over there where you can isolate guitar amps and the other gobos we have with the windows, I mean, you can make it super dead. So that's kind of the beauty of it, is that it works both ways. And these panels, you know, they're very effective. You know, right now we've got them shut, so that's the reflective side is, you know, we're using it to make the room more on the live side. But sometimes if I have a vocalist out here who wants to track live in the room with the drums, I'll shut them to try to help keep a little of the cymbal bleed out of the vocal.
And we still cut, like when I did my album, or Scott produced, and so did my daughter Hallie, but we cut the tracks live with the vocal. That's really the way I wanted to do it, because I really am of the school that the vocal is just part of the band, And to add it later, yeah, you can do that, and it's great. But if you can do it with the band, to me, it just gives it just everything is going at the same time, same deal. And so we were all live except for overdubs. We did strings and horns and some voices, which we probably would have done it all at once if we could have got everybody in here at once, you know. But it turned out pretty good, I think. And Scott's a great engineer and producer. And so, yeah, I mean, we can do, like Scott said, we can do any setup in here we want, except we don't really want to tear down our booths or anything like that, you know. Everything in here you see, the B3 and all this stuff is original to the studio. This piano, the Baldwin Studio Grand, it came in a little bit later because the Sun Studio piano was in here for a while. But we bought that piano. That's been a great piano. And that B3's been here since whatever year that B3 is. It's a 60-something, I'm imagining, don't you think?
Yeah, I've always thought that this is one of the best sounding, if not the best sounding B3 in Memphis. Before I worked here, when I would come in and do sessions as a musician or outside producer, engineer, I've just always loved this B3. This clavinet is original to the studio. It's an early model, and we just got this refurbished. And then the Model D Mini Moog that's over there, we just got that back from it being overhauled, and it's like a real early serial number. It's a very early model, and I was told by Judd Phillips that you guys bought that James Brown was going to come here and record, and he wanted a Mini Moog. And
probably true.
The
yeah.
session didn't happen, but you guys got a Mini Moog out of it.
Probably true. And two, man, you know, like we still use these A7 cabinets, these Voice of Theater A7 cabinets for playback, and man, to me, they sound as good as anything you can buy new today. You know, they really do. And if you got your band out here and you don't want anybody to move, just play it back for them out here. And I don't really like everybody coming into the control room, listening, and then coming back out and setting back up, because then you're moving. You know, you're moving from whatever sound that you worked hard to get. I'm not saying you can't get it again, but it's just better. Even better than listening to it through the headphones. Those A7s, man, they just got some punch to them that really makes it feel real, which I think that's what we're all about, and what we're recording here is real music, you know. And we don't even have a tuner. We don't have a tuner, do we, on our Pro Tools? You have to be able to sing to get on the analog or the Pro Tools here, that's a unique idea, and it had to actually be able to sing. Dang.
What I've noticed about working in this room the past 3 years is that you don't have to work hard to get a good sound in here. It's just people come in and you set up the mics and the sound's there. You don't have to sit there for an hour messing around with mic placement and EQ and compression. It's just kind of the sounds out here, and it's just really easy to get a good sound here quickly.
And you know, my dad, when he was engineering, he always considered himself part of the band. You know, he didn't just get the levels right and then be thinking about his girlfriend or something, you know. He was always playing with the band. If he felt something needed to come up that moment or that second, the piano or whatever, he would push it up, you know. And
that's a lot of what we do here, and I think that's probably a lot of what kind of is the Memphis sound, and a lot of what people here in Memphis do is have the players and the singer in the room together, and it's like kind of that live thing and that moment that happens in the room. That's, to me, a lot of what making a record here is about, is getting that feel and capturing the song with the artist live in the room with the band.
I was talking to musicians while we were playing. You know, sometimes I might yell at them or scream, or I don't mean something weird, but just the emotion that came out of me from them playing made me become a part of that situation. And I think if everybody did it that way, it might be a better product in the end, you know, the real deal.
You guys ready to go check out the control room?
Might as well.
Let's do it. Working here at Sam Phillips Recording with Jerry and his daughter Hallie and Diane Phillips and the whole Phillips family, this is a dream come true for me. To me, you know, Sam Phillips and what he started at Sun, that's what got everybody in Memphis started with recording. I don't believe there would have been a Stax Records or Gold Wax or High Records, or none of that would have ever happened without Sam. He was definitely the pioneer that put Memphis on the map. So to be able to work with their family and work with them here at the studio is a dream come true, and it's been amazing going through and bringing back all of their vintage outboard gear that was original to the studio. One of the first things we did when I came to work here, we took 18 of the Universal Audio mic pre's that were in the original console that was custom made for the studio in 1960, and we racked those up. So we have 18 channels of the original mic pre. So if you want to come in and you want to record through the same amps that Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, Jerry Lee Lewis, Charlie Rich all recorded through, you can come here and do that. And they're just fantastic sounding mic pre's. Also, this is a newer console from when you guys were here last. A friend of mine that works at the Stax Museum, he got in touch with me and said, "Hey, I hear that you're going over to Sam Phillips to work." And I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm really excited about it." And he said, "Well, I think that Sam Phillips Recording needs a Stax console." And I said, "Well, I think Sam Phillips Recording needs a Stax console too." I said, "Let me talk to Jerry and Hallie about it." So I got in touch with Jerry about it. I said, "Hey, you know, there's a console over at Stax they have in storage that I think we could get over here if we want it." And Jerry said, "Well, is there any way to find out what was recorded for that through that console?" He goes, "I don't know if we shouldn't get a Stax console if nothing was really done on it." I said, "Well, let me find out." So I called my friend Willie Hall, who was a session player over at Stax. He played on all the Isaac Hayes albums and Little Milton, Rufus Thomas, just tons. Barkays, yeah. He played on tons of records over there and sessions. He was in the Blues Brothers. So I called Willie. I said, "Hey, Willie," I said, "Studio B at Stax, was that just like overdubs and mixing, or did you guys do sessions that, you know, record tracking sessions?" He said, "Oh, man," he goes, "we did all kinds of albums in there." He started rattling off names. He's like, "We did Rufus Thomas, The Breakdown, The Funky Chicken. We started naming off all the Isaac Hayes albums that were done in that room." So went back to Jerry. I said, "Hey, man, I got good news. They did a lot of work on that console, and it was used on a lot of really big records at Stax." We spent a year refurbishing the console, and we installed it in October of 2022. And the first thing we recorded on it was Jerry Phillips's album that's going to be coming out a little bit later this year.
Yeah, it made a believer out of me, because I was used to that DDA console, was an English-made console. This has got a lot more bottom end to it, you know, than the other, and a lot more real sounding. And I think it's really, now that Scott, you know, talked me into it and Hallie into it when he did, you know, it's more proper vintage console than what was in here. Because, you know, from 1960 on, we were always trying to get the latest and greatest stuff, you know, and that's what we did, you know. And this was in a way a step back, you know, in time. I'm certainly glad we did it, you know, and I'm certainly glad Scott's here to know how to make it run like a hot rod, you know. I mean, it's a great console, sounds great, and just really, really, really glad that it's in here now, you know, much more than that DDA. I mean, the DDA was cool and everything, and everybody said, "What kind of console you got?" And you go, "DDA," and the conversation kind of stopped there, you know what I mean? But I mean, it was a good console, not putting that DDA at all down, but this just seems to fit better for our vintage studio and, you know, what we got going on, what kind of stuff we're recording here.
I do feel like the sound of this desk sounds like what's on the other side of the glass. That's one of the things I like about it. I can mic something out there and I can come in here and it sounds like what I heard out there. But this console is very special. It's a Spectrasonics console, but it was modified by Daniel Flickinger. So it's a hybrid between a Spectrasonics and a Flickinger. It's a beautiful sounding desk, and it seems to work really well with any type of music that we record through it. It's like, doesn't matter what type music, it really loves it, and everything sounds good through it. Phillips has had a special relationship with Universal Audio because there's a great deal of Universal Audio equipment here. As I know that Sam used to get a lot of his stuff mastered up in Chicago. Bill Putnam would master it We have a lot of UA here, UA gear. There's an original 176 that's original to the studio. We have 3 UA 175 limiters that are original to the studio. Yuri Cooper Tom Cube, LA2A, LA3A. There's a lot of people who come here and work from other places, Nashville and LA and New York, and they say our LA2A is one of the best sounding ones that they've ever heard. This is another piece that we recently just got put back in service. It's an Eventide instant phaser. If you're looking for like a flanging or phaser effect, I don't think there's anything that does it better than that. It's got a really, really nice, deep, really unique sound.
One of the first things Scott did when he got here, because we never threw anything away, you know, equipment-wise, and it was all in our shop here, just crammed in there, all in there. And the first thing Scott did really kind of was like discover all this stuff back there, you know, and he's really responsible for, you know, getting all this stuff racked up and back in use again and getting whatever was needed to be fixed. And before he came here, everything was just fine as far as, you know, everything we had was working, but we had a lot of, especially those mic pre's, they just were in a rack back there, you know. He's done a real good job of recapturing the past that we had stored and bringing it up to the future and the present, you know, now.
Thank you. And, you know, Matt Rossbang being here before I was here, he certainly laid a great foundation to come in here and work.
Yeah, he did. Matt came in and, you know, everything had become digital kind of. So we really weren't using there. In fact, we had some of our echo chambers just had stuff in them, you know, like a storage room. And, you know, Matt really suggested that we get those things up and running again. Of course, you know, there's a time period when you didn't think you needed the analog chambers, because everything was just this was even before plug-ins. I mean, it was like just all kinds
digital
of
reverbs.
Yeah, digital reverbs. Everybody thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And it was, you know, but it really just doesn't touch, you know, these 3 chambers we've got here, an analog chamber. And I don't know that I ever really, because I grew up around here and worked around here, I don't know that I ever appreciated the value of that analog chamber sound, because you just can't get it. You can get close. I think they got some plugins that sound pretty close, you know, but when you say, that's not a plug-in, man, that's a real chamber.
For me, when it comes to recording, I'll use whatever tools are at my disposal. It could be something that just came out a month ago and is like something new that's never existed before. And I use plugins. I mean, almost every session I use, if it's in a DAW, I'm using plugins. There's plugins I love and I use on every session. But every client is different. Every session calls for something different. And I have to say, if I've been working in the digital world a lot and then, you know, a session comes in that's on analog tape and it's all on tape, I go like, man, why don't I just use tape all the time? Because it's like I forget sometimes how great tape sounds. This 8-track Scully machine here, this 1-inch machine, that's my machine that I brought over when I moved in, and it has no remote, it has no counter, and it's got 8 tracks. And I made a lot of records on that machine, and I think that me learning how to make a record on that machine with only 8 tracks and limitations, I think it made me a better engineer. I think it made me be able to use a digital audio workstation and still kind of think about it in this context where you have to filter out everything and you have to think like, what is the most important things to capture? You can't it's like the more mics you start using, it just starts to make things like technically more complicated than it needs to be. So working on that machine a lot helped me like really be able to focus and I think get better at engineering. And then the 24-track 2-inch Studer that's here, every time I use that machine, I just think, why do I not just use this on every single session? Because the transport is like from going from this to the Studer, it's like going from a Model T to a Cadillac. It's just, the transport works great. It handles tape really well. It's got a really great sound. It's easy to set up. So,
And I mean, I think it's great that, you don't have to take a razor blade and cut the tape and do all the stuff you used to have to do. Because, I mean, you have to be a damn expert at editing. I messed up the front end of a Charlie Rich tape one time that I thought, man, I don't think I ever even admitted that I did it, because it freaked me out so bad. I said, I screwed up the front end of the intro on Charlie Rich's session, man. But it was a very precise deal to edit, and then roll it back, roll it back, roll it back, roll it back, and then your splice had to be perfect, or when it went over the head, you'd hear it, So it was a lot more. There's a lot more stuff involved there. And then there's the Pro Tools that I don't know much about, to be honest with you, because I'm not engineering really anymore. But that's the greatest thing that's ever been invented, really, when you think about it. What you can do, you don't lose anything, you can back it up, you can do anything you want to it. So, but I personally do think people depend on those things a little bit too much, Like I was talking earlier about, can we just get in the room and play? And don't worry about trying to fix it later, That fix it later mentality, I think, is it's not the greatest thing that ever happened to the recording industry, or the record business. That's my 2 cents worth. We were talking earlier about the third generation of this control room configuration, and we've been here 64 years, and I've been in the music business pretty much all my life, and of course my dad was the first generation, and my brother and I were second generation. And then my daughter, Hallie, you come in here for a minute, babe. This is the third generation of the Phillips family. And she is great. She's a co-producer on my album, and she's produced albums on for herself. I mean, not on herself, but with other artists. But she, when I used to try to run away from my family because I didn't want to be in the shadow of Sam Phillips, I never understood how bad I was hurting him, because I didn't appreciate how hard he worked for me to say, nah, I'm really not interested in this. I'm gonna go over and work for another record company, which I did. And Hallie is really, be honest with you, when we were kind of in between, never closed or anything, but we were in some kind of disrepair at different times or other. Building was in a little bad shape and everything. She really said, Dad, I think we need to go down to the studio and just, get it together down there. And so, and that's what we did. And so she's been here, she works in our radio properties. She's vice president of our companies, and not that she didn't earn all that, because she actually did. But, it's great to have a third generation. I'm like the prodigal son in the Bible. I ran away, and then I woke up one day and said, what are you doing, man? You need to get back down there and start working in the studio, get on back down there. And so I came back, and my dad welcomed me with open arms, never said a thing to me about leaving or anything. It was all back to normal. But she's got a lot to say about the music business today, and she's helped me with so much. And what's your opinion of our studio?
Oh, well, I just think it's the coolest place in the world. It's a timeless place. I don't care what stage of recording you're at. I've always said you find yourself when you come to a place like this. There's just something that happens when you're in an environment with this kind of energy, everybody in a room together, and capturing that. Instead of people recording in studios all over the country and piecing it all together, it's just that thing that you can't put your finger on, that's magic, that creates timeless music. And I'm just really proud that I get to kind of continue this for my family and introduce people to this style of recording and show them what a real echo chamber is. A lot of people, especially young people, don't know what that is. And I just really couldn't be more proud than to, get to do that.
And, it's great to have somebody her age to relate to other people her age,
I'm not that young anymore.
You're not that young, but you're not old either, believe me, you're not old. But it is important to have somebody that can, some younger people don't want to really listen to me necessarily, because I can barely book a motel room on the internet, I'm kind of kidding a little bit, but somebody that's really up to speed with everything is good to have in your organization. And she's man, I mean, not to be blowing her up, but she's really kind of taken over our publishing companies, and the royalties, of paying the royalties, and that's an important part of our business is the publishing, song publishing. I mean, we make a fair substantial amount of money off of song publishing, and she's jumped right in and grabbed a hold of the bull, not really knowing much. That's a very complicated end of the music business, is the publishing end of it. It's very complicated. You almost have to be an attorney actually to understand it all. But she's done really great, and I'm real proud of her.
Well, you learn from experience, I mean, and not knocking people who are formally educated or anything, but, some of the best musicians or engineers, anybody I've ever met, just got in there and did the work and became great. So I feel like, I kind of just jumped in, and I've made a lot of mistakes and grown a lot along the way, but, we're doing all right.
Third generation.
You started working for Sam when you were...
Yeah, I was 15. Yeah, I was 15, and was just kind of answering the telephones for our radio station. And
but first it was at his house.
First it was at his house, yeah. And then I moved. I was born in Memphis, and then I moved to Florence, Alabama, in which Sam was kind of the opposite. He was born in Florence and moved to Memphis. But
tell him about when you answered the phone. He says, "Hey," he called, and you answered at his house.
Yeah, well, he would call to see how I would answer the phone, even as a teenager, and he would really get on to me really bad if I answered it. Like this time it was at the radio station, so I'd go, Big River Broadcasting, this is Hallie. And he's like, you don't sound like you're happy to be there, and you're the first impression of our entire business. And, he that was a little small thing, but it has impacted me, so far the rest of my life, because now every time I answer the phone or I go in and interact with somebody, I remember that. My grandmother, Becky, would say, a smile on your face puts a smile on your voice. She was one of the best disc jockeys I ever heard, female disc jockeys. Part of the first all-girl radio station in the nation, WHER Radio, that Sam started in 1955, that Becky Phillips, she taught me that. And
all girls,
yeah,
1,000 beautiful watts.
Yeah. Pretty progressive. Pretty progressive, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is different. Your life growing up under Sam was different. Mine certainly was. We're cut from a different cloth. There's no doubt about it.
Anybody growing up from Sam Phillips was different. He's an artist. You just ask any of his artists, just anybody about what's going on, and he just he was always he was friends with everybody, but he never got too close because somebody had to be the boss, And that's a good lesson to learn in life sometimes, is that somebody's got to be the boss and make the hard shots. But I mean, he was an overcomer, and he kind of taught us all of that, just hey man, just do it,
Our future here is to continue making great music, hopefully inspiring creativity and breaking new barriers, introducing new sounds.
She co-produced my album with Scott. I feel like David Letterman or somebody going, "You got that book I want you to buy." But I mean, she's both of these people have been a real blessing. Put it that way. But I'm sorry.
I think the future's bright. We've got great people here. We've got people like Scott, Jeff Powell. In my opinion, I mean, Matt Rossbang comes in, or Matt Brown, sorry. So you're talking about Matt Brown. I think the future is really bright.
We're talking about Jeff Powell, and Scott and I both will have to kind of fill you in on Jeff Powell. He's got a company called Takeout Vinyl that's next door. He's one of the top vinyl cutters, I guess you'd call it, and then what we'd call it,
vinyl mastering.
Vinyl mastering guys in the country, and we've been really blessed to have him here. And you may know his history more than I do. I know he was at Ardent for a while, and Larry Nix taught him, but you may have a more detailed.
Well, before Jeff really became a full-time vinyl mastering engineer, I mean, he has had an amazing career as a producer and engineer. I mean, did records with Tom Dowd, he did Leonard Skinner, the Allman Brothers, Primal Scream. He's had a really, really amazing career as a producer and engineer. And I guess it was 15 or so years ago, he got really interested in learning how to cut vinyl. He was working at a studio here in Memphis called Ardent at the time. There was a mastering engineer there. His name was Larry Nix. And Larry had come from Stax Records, and when Stax went out of business, he took the Neumann lathe that he had at Stax and he moved it over to Ardent, and he was set up over there for decades. And so Jeff started working with Larry, and that's where he learned to cut vinyl. And then he later was ready to branch out on his own and get his own lathe and start his own business. And thankfully, he ended up here at Sam Phillips Recording. And he does just absolutely phenomenal work. He's really known as one of the best when it comes to getting your music on lacquer for vinyl. And he's done some really unique and amazing projects since he's had takeout vinyl. But he's got great stories. He's probably the best storyteller that I know. He's a really great guy to be able to come into work every day and hang out with.
Really is.
Hi, I'm Jeff Powell, and this is my vinyl mastering room within Sam Phillips. My company's called Takeout Vinyl. I bought this lathe and moved in here in 2015. I had learned the craft basically in the basics of it. I'm still learning every day, really. But I started in 2008 at Ardent Studios, and Larry Nix had a mastering room over there, and he had the original Stax lathe, which was very similar to this. The core of it was a VMS 72. His rack was different, but the machine had kind of fallen out of repair and not working, and I just kind of started asking Larry about it just in the hallway. In my past life, I was a mixer, producer, engineer kind of guy. So anyway, Larry and I had been friends, worked at Ardent for years, and like, hey man, why don't we get that machine working again? And maybe you could teach me how to cut, and you go home every night at 5 o'clock, and I could maybe cut some records at the end of the night, and I'll rent the machine from you and leave you a check on the turntable. Wouldn't that be a cool way to start your day? And his first response was absolutely not. He's like, I'm on medication because of that damn machine, And so there are some days indeed where I know now what he was talking about. But for the most part, I really love it. So that's where I got my background. I came from Ardent. In the end of 2014, John Fry, who was the owner of Ardent, passed away. And basically, long story short, it took till about June of 2015, and they just made some radical changes, and the locks got changed one day. So I was without a machine to work on. So the options were find a lathe, and there really aren't any in the world. Move to somewhere else that had some lathes going, and probably have to give half the money up to whoever owned the machine for cutting on their machine, or I was done. And kind of almost by miracle, I found this lathe within 2 weeks after that happened. I made a deal with the guy and went up to get it. It was Chad Kassem from Quality Record Pressing in Salina, Kansas. And then I got Chris Muth. I hired him to basically decommission it there, take it all apart. I moved it down here. And then he came down here and helped me get it all set up. And I just jumped in and started cutting. So at that time in 2015, I was still doing some recording sessions and mixing and producing. These days, I do nothing but cut vinyl records. It's taken me over, and that's in a good way. I just love doing it. Very passionate about it. I've gotten to work on some really, really cool records. And continue to. So the business is going right along now. I have one guy who works with me, and that's Lucas Peterson, and he's a cutter too. He's been with me since my days at Ardent, so it's great having him involved as well. When someone wants me to cut their vinyl record, basically they reach out to me, and I usually tell them, let's have a quick phone call, because it's much easier than going back and forth with texting or email, and tell them what's what they can expect. I usually give them a little homework. I usually advise them. I said, when you call me, have an analog piece of paper and a pen in your hand so you can write some of this stuff down. So I'll make some recommendations of who they might want to try for plating and who they might want to try for pressing. Sometimes that's the same plant. It kind of can depend geographically too, where they're located, who I might suggest. There's plants all over the world and I've probably worked with most all of them by now. So we'll kind of go through, and basically what that process is they would have their whatever a traditional mastering engineer is who's going to do their digital mastering for streaming, or even some people still make CDs or what have you, but more the traditional digital mastering people will go through and they'll make a separate what we call vinyl pre-master. And what that entails is it's different from depending on who I'm working with, but typically what that means pre-mastered for vinyls, they'll knock the level down a little bit because there's no way we can fit the levels that the digital is at even close to getting that on the disc. So they may knock down just the overall level. They may relax the limiting. If there's excessive high frequency information, they may tamp that down a little bit. De-essing even, if there's loud hi-hats or cymbals or S's and sibilants on the vocal, they may, the ones who are really good at it don't go too far. They basically kind of just lightly touch it and still leave me room to do what I do and run through my analog chain and sometimes digital as well. Sometimes I mix the two to do what I do. And I just listen to the music and I set up my chain to where I think I'm going to be able to get the best sounding, the music to sound the best on a vinyl disc. At that point, what we do is, if you can see here, as on the lathe, this, when I'm cutting a lacquer, this moves across the platter like this, etching the groove into the blank lacquer. I set it all up, and then we do what we call dummy runs, basically. So I'll set it up, I'll hit the button to make it start going, and it'll move across, it'll stop where it drops the head, but we don't drop the cutter head. This is all not done on a lacquer. So it moves across as if we were cutting. In between songs, we do what we call manual banding. So, the little extra line, you can see where each song starts and stops. That's a move where I push this button in, that speeds up this lead screw, and then I hit this button, which speeds it up a little bit more, which just makes that little line thing to see. So audio is still running through. It doesn't matter if you miss it on the millisecond. You just want it where somebody can drop the needle and the next song is going to start. But that's all a manual move. So you run the whole side, and then, as you can may or may not be able to see right here, there's a ruler down here. And if I make it before it hits the 0, I know it's going to fit. And then I put a lacquer on and we cut the record. Barring any mechanical malfunctions, which that's a very rare kind of thing, or whatever, once we do that, the lacquer's cut. We can't play the lacquer after it's cut or it'll destroy the high end. So I look at it through this microscope here. I scope over the whole record, make sure I don't see anything that looks weird, where the grooves have they might kiss, or one might cut into the other one a little bit if the room's too tight, or if it's a really long side and there's not enough land. If that happens, and you see it, you got to do it again. Once everything looks okay, I have these guns too. This is actually a blow-off gun for dust or anything on the record. So I blow it off really good before I look at it under the microscope. That's nitrogen that comes out of there. That's an inert gas, and it doesn't leave any kind of residue or anything on the master. This other hose here also is hooked up to the nitrogen tank, but this also shoots out negative ions. So it reduces any static electricity that might be on the surface of the record. I do that before I cut too, so it won't collect dust. Dust is my enemy. Once I look through that and everything looks good, I blow the record off. We build a little box back here with a bolt going through it, a special process that we do. Everybody kind of does that different, but you put an old blanker or a blank lacquer at the bottom as a spacer, and then we have these little spacers that we put in, and we stack the lacquers up on a bolt. We bolt it down really tight where the records don't move around at all, and put a packing slip on the box or in the box, and we ship it off. I always try to get my clients to agree to let me ship it out overnight, so it arrives at the plating facility the next morning. And that way, to get it in the bath and turn into to make metal stampers out of it, really the sooner that I can do that, the better. You don't want it to sit around in a box for a week or two, especially in the summertime when it's hot. They can actually melt. So they take the lacquer that I've done, they do a chemical process where they clean it, they spray it with silver, then they put it in a corrosive nickel bath that has an electric current running through it, and that adheres to the silver particles, and they make what's called the father. So from the father, that's a negative of my lacquer. And the lacquer is usually destroyed in that process. So they got to get that right the first time, or we got to do it again as well. Then they do that process again. They make a negative that's called the mother. So the mother is actually a metal representation of the lacquer that I just cut. You can actually play a mother, and to check for if there's problems down the road. You can back, there's a loud pop on the second song on side B. Can you drop the needle on the mother? Is the pop there? No, it's not. Okay, that just means we need to make a new stamper then. There was nothing wrong with the lacquer. If there is something on the mother, I get a call and we have to start over again and do it again. So from the mother, that's what they make the stampers from. And you can make a number of stampers. It depends on the music, whether you're going 180 gram vinyl or not. Sometimes stampers wear out a little faster. But they go and they attach that actually to the pressing machines, and that's when they stamp out your test pressings. They send those out to the client. They take a listen, and if everything's good, they call and say everything's wonderful. Go ahead with the job. If there's not, and there's a problem that we can't fix or talk through or make another stamp or try to get around it, then again we start over. And that can be very frustrating because it can take 6 to 8 weeks just to get to that point, you know. In a nutshell, that's basically the process. Once everything's cool with that and the test pressings have been approved, then they stamp out however many that you ordered, and that's the whole way that it's done. And if you want to check out my website, it's www.takeoutvinyl.com.
So this is Sam Phillips Studio B, and I've been in here about 3 years. When Matt Rossbang moved out of this room, I told Matt when he said he was building his own studio, I said, man, when you move out of your room, I want to move in, because I always like coming in here and working with him on projects and hanging out. I always thought this was a cool room. Before Matt was here, I would come to Phillips and do work, and I'd always kind of like sneak down the hall and like peek in this room. And back then it was, you know, had a bunch of carpet, it had a booth in it. And when Matt came in, he completely redid it and kind of took it back to what it was like when it was originally made. But it's got the same panels, just like Studio A. These things are super useful. I've got them all out now, so it makes it a little bit more on the dead side in here, because I've been doing mostly mixing in this room. That's what Matt used it for. It's great for mixing, and then if you're in the middle of mixing and somebody wants to do like an overdub on something, you know, you've got a space back there in the back where you can, throw an overdub on. And the rooms are actually, we're able to patch from one studio to another. So a couple of months back, the band Little Feat was here at Phillips making a record, and they were all in the A room recording. And the percussion player, he wanted to play his bongos or his conga drums in more of a live room. And I said, well, you know, the B studio's got a linoleum floor. It's a lot more live. So he came back here and we set him up, and we were able to like patch his mic in here and run it into the A room. And he tracked his congas live in this room with everybody else in the other room. It actually worked out really great. But I had my own studio for about 20 years before I came here. It was called Phillips Recording. Did a lot of projects there, made a lot of records, and this gear was all at Electrophonic. And I've had this MCI console for probably close to 20 years now. It's a 416B. It's one of their early consoles. It has a bit of a connection to the console in the A room, because from what I understand, some of the engineers that left Flickinger, when Flickinger went out of business, went down and worked for MCI, and they helped design this console. And there's some similarities between this console and Flickinger's. Mainly the way the light meters work are similar to a Flickinger. And then over here I've got some tape machines and some outboard gear. This is an Ampex 351 full track mono machine that I use it a lot for slapback and for delay. Sometimes I use it as a pre-delay to a plate reverb or for a chamber. And then this is a Scully 2-track 1/4-inch machine, and I do a lot of mixing down to that machine. It's got a really great sound. I really love the sound of that machine a lot. Most of this outboard gear is gear that I've had for probably 15 or 20 years, and I've used on nearly every project I've ever done. This UA 175, it's one of the ones that belongs to Phillips. The 1176 is mine, and it's a really unique one. It's a anniversary edition that they made, so it has some things about it that are like an LN version. It has other elements about it that are similar to an early Blue Stripe version. It's kind of a hybrid. But my favorite thing about it is that it actually has a 2-to-1 ratio, and I'm use that all the time. It's very useful. Everything down here in this rack is all, that's all made by a gentleman named Frank Lacey, and he makes a lot of custom equipment. And he used to live down in Oxford, Mississippi, so a lot of people kind of in Memphis have his gear because he used to live down the road, but he's in Nashville now. But that's one of his tube limiters and 2 of his tube EQs, and Jeff actually has some of his EQs as well. This is my Spectrasonics rack. So in here's an original 610, and right below it, these are Spectrasonics 101 cards. Really basic version of their EQ. You know, I've made so many records on this gear. I've worked on it so much that I know it really well. I know everything in this room super well, so I can come in here and turn everything on and be up and rolling and get what I'm looking for pretty quick. Originally, when the studio here was built, this was the live room for Studio B, and the control room was where Jeff Powell's room is. But now this room is kind of the control room and the cutting floor all in one. And another thing that's really cool about Phillips and about this room is that the live chambers here, you can patch into the live chambers in the A room and in the B room. So if, say you've got a tracking session going on in A and a mixing session in here, well, you can like patch the chambers into this room and be using them here. Or you can use 1 or 2 of the chambers here and patch one of them into Studio A. So we're able to, patch in between the rooms, and that's very useful. So we'll go look at the echo chamber next, the main chamber. So there are 3 chambers here at Phillips. There's this one that's downstairs, that's one of the larger ones, and then upstairs there's a very large one, and then there's a smaller one. But this is the one that gets used most often. It has a very magical sound, in my opinion, and other people who've heard it, they would totally agree. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's you pretty much instantly get the sense of the space. I remember when Matt worked here, I would come in here sometimes, and he'd be working on Elvis recordings, and you would hear Elvis's voice in there coming down the hallway, and it was very lifelike, very 3-dimensional. I feel like it's like the closest you could ever get to like hearing Elvis in person. There's just something about Elvis's voice in this chamber. It was like very special. It adds a dimension to a recording that no other outboard reverb I've ever used adds. It's just very 3-dimensional because it is 3-dimensional. But Sam Phillips designed this to his specifications, and it's kind of the perfect delay. It's the perfect reverb. It just works perfectly, and it sits in a mix perfectly. And we love it, and people who come here to record and mix, they fall in love with it and fall in love with the sound. All right, so that's the A chamber here at Phillips, and now we're gonna go upstairs and show you guys the fun part. We're gonna show you guys the lounge. So this is our upstairs lounge, and bands who come here and record will come up here and relax. And also, sometimes we have some real big bands in here with crews and things, and we'll set up tables and do catering up here. We've done songwriting workshops here. We've had film screenings up here. It's just a really great space to do events and get together. And originally this was all offices. It was all partitioned off into cubicles, and it's where the Sam Phillips Recording had publishing companies and promotion people. They were all up here. The white sofa, the table, the yellow chair, that was all from Sam Phillips's lake house on the Tennessee River. This Adrian Persol sofa originally was upstairs by Sam Phillips's office. And a couple years back, Jack White was here, and he saw it, and he told Jerry Phillips, he said, you know, I do upholstery work. And he told Jerry, he said, if you promise not to sell this on eBay and tell people that I recovered it, I'll recover it for you. And so he did. And underneath, there's a Third Man Upholstery label underneath it. So that's a cool piece. It's got a cool story. But this is just a great space. This table and chairs, this came from Sam Phillips's house. This was originally by his pool. And Jerry said that when he was younger, that Elvis would come over and hang out with his dad, and that Elvis and Sam Phillips would sit at this table and hang out by the pool. But if you guys can't tell, I really have a thing for all-tech speakers. I had a pair down in the B room where we were earlier, and then I have a second pair up here in this room. I really love those speakers, and so this is also kind of a little listening room where if you want to play something you've been working on or play a record for inspiration, you can come up here and put it on. We got a couple more stops. We're gonna head on up to the 3rd floor to the bar and Sam Phillips's office. So apparently Sam Phillips really had a thing about frogs. Sam really liked frogs. So if you could see here, there's quite a few frogs in here. And I was told that this originally used to have water that ran through it, but at some point it started to leak. So they drained it and put sand in it. But I would have loved to have seen this when it had water going through it. This is one of our favorite aspects of the studio. We have our own bar here. Jerry Phillips said that when all the Sun artists would come back to Memphis from being on tour, that they'd all come up here and hang out because it'd be their own little private bar. So Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Charlie Rich, Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, they all came up here and they'd hang out and have drinks and relax after being on tour. One interesting thing about the bar here is that there's some cigarette burns, and I've been told that those are either from Johnny Cash or Charlie Rich. I'm not sure which one of the two, but one night one of those guys was up here and they left a cigarette burning and burned a couple of holes in the bar up here, but it makes for a good story. Pretty fun. It's a nice place to come and unwind after a real long day in the studio. So back there is Sam Phillips's office. And it's unchanged since the day they built it. Jerry said when they first built the studio that the carpet came with its own rake. I've looked around for the rake. I keep thinking maybe I'll find it. I'd love to come across the rake. But back when this place first opened, there was a secretary here. There's 3 offices back here where people were working. So this was like, there was a lot of activity here back when they first opened. There's a deck area out here on the roof, and they used to have bands play out on the deck, and that's something we want to do again one day. They created something here where artists could come and feel comfortable and relax and capture their music and have a good time and feel at home when they do it. I hope you guys enjoyed Sam Phillips Recording. Really glad you all came by. We always love sharing the studio with people. Glad Jerry and Hallie were here today and you got to meet them again and hang out. So it's been great talking to you guys, and thanks again for coming. All right, y'all take care. Oh man, Matt is still here. God. Hey man.
Can I come in now?
I told you, man, you got to go. And actually, he came with you guys. You guys just get out of here. Just go. Just leave. God, man, don't come back.